There are 4 rejection strategies, and these were developed by Dr. James Kim from the University of Toronto. I thought these were interesting in his work. So I'm going to kind of give these to you for you to kind of think about. All right. So there's 4 rejection strategies, he calls them. And these are based on preliminary surveys that he did of married couples, and his colleagues found that these sexual rejection strategies are basically 4 categories or 4 types. So let's kind of look at those. Number 1, he said one category of sexual rejection strategy is the reassuring rejection. The reassuring rejection. Here's what they write. You explain that you don't want to have sex tonight, but you reassure your partner that you love them and are still attracted to them. You also offer alternative forms of physical contact, such as kissing and snuggling, while promising to make it up to them in the near future. It's like you're rejecting them, but you want to let them down softly. You want to let them down lightly. As you begin to let them down softly or lightly, all right, you think you're doing them a favor, but either way, they're still being rejected. And then you offer, well, I'll be willing to do this and this, but I'm not going to do this. And I'll make it up to you in the future. Well, when is that going to be? I don't know, but I'll make it up to you. But when? I don't know. This actually allows the rejector to feel good about the rejecting, believing and thinking that if I do it this way, then I can still send the message I love you and care about you, but I still don't have to meet the needs or be there for you sexually. The downside of this kind of rejection is most of these folks who do this reassuring rejection, they're doing it out of a sense of care and love that they believe, and I think on some level it is. However, because they don't follow through on the promise to make it up, and they don't understand, you are still rejecting. In the end, they're still being rejected. And there's a sense of, do you care? Well, of course I care, but I'm not able to. But okay, then they ask again, desire for connection, and you get this, they get the same reassuring rejection over and over and over. So the reassuring rejection is one category. The second type of sexual rejection noted by Dr. James Kim at the University of Toronto is this. He calls it hostile rejection. Hostile rejection. Here they write, you display frustration towards your partner, or you criticize other aspects of the relationship. Likewise, you may give your partner the silent treatment or criticize the way they initiated sex. Basically, this is the type that's critical, that's insensitive, that's unfeeling, that's demeaning. And out of all of that, I'm not going to have sex with you. It's fault finding. Ultimately, it's getting what you want and them not getting what they want. The good side for you is you get to feel powerful because they did something and you're punishing them for it. The only problem is it whittles away the us. It tears down your partner. At least in reassuring rejection, you're not tearing them down. You're still rejecting, but you're not tearing them down. Here, you're tearing them down. You're attacking. You're sending the message. There's something wrong with you, and that's just the way it's going to be. Hostile rejection will never build an athlete, but on one level, it can lead to contempt. Showing contempt for your partner. You know, there's a difference between contempt and anger. When two people are angry at each other, essentially they're saying, though I'm angry at you, unconsciously, they still see each other as equals. So you still treat each other as if you're equal. Contempt is more insidious. Contempt for your partner essentially says, I am morally superior to you. So how do you show contempt? Rolling your eyes at them, pursing your lip, pointing out all their deficiencies and how much better yours are. Contempt is very destructive. As a matter of fact, contempt is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, a term that John Gottman gave to the 4 traits that predict divorce at 93%. Contempt is one of them. Hostile rejection can lead to contempt for your partner. You're contemptuous towards them. So why would I want to give myself to you? No love in it for sure. And you still get the rejection, and the rejector still gets rejected with all the contempt and anger and all the criticism. And the rejectee or the rejector doesn't have to give. Third category or form of rejection on Dr. James Kim's work is what he calls assertive rejection. Assertive rejection. Let me read here. You explain to your partner in a clear and direct manner why you don't want to have sex. You explain to your partner in a clear and direct manner why you don't want to have sex, which sounds nice. Well, the reason I don't want to do this now is because this, and this, and this isn't, yada, yada, right? You go on. He goes on here and says, while you're honest with them, this is the key to it. Even though you're explaining to them in a clear and direct manner why you're not going to have sex with them, you're honest with them. The downside of assertive rejection is you have little regard for their feelings. You have little regard and empathy for what they're going through being rejected. Because you're clear and assertive about why, they understand the why, but in the end, they're still hurting. They're still feeling rejected. They're feeling unloved. They're feeling that there's something wrong with them. And the message you send is a cold, stony, I don't care. Real simple. I don't care. I'm doing it for these reasons. This is why I'm doing it. But little regard for the pain, the hurt, the rejection, the abandonment, and all the other stuff that goes on inside of them. But you feel good about yourself because you actually, you are honest. But in the end, there's no empathy. There's a lack of compassion. And even though you may continue to move on and go do what you want to do, they're still hurting. And it begs the question, does anybody care? I've learned something in my work, and we talk about it, is Americans don't value relationships. We value winning arguments. We value being right. We value hyper individualism. And in our individualism, we've actually created a very immature society. You see, true healthy maturity, which is about emotional development, can only happen in close, healthy relationships. But the breakdown of the family has led to isolation and loneliness. We don't have healthy people connecting and maturing because maturity comes through relationship. That's why we're so immature. We value being individual rather than connection. And if I do have a connection, it's on my terms. There's such high divorce rates for that, right? And so you never want to send a message, I don't care, but we do it rather regularly. One of the 4 protectors of Relate Well, which is our program that teaches people how to have healthy, connected relationships with anybody, and to help us become healthy, mature adults so we can love and relate well in all aspects of relationships. The fundamentals there are what we call the 4 protectors of an us: goodwill, respect, humility, and empathy as a way of being. That's the problem with assertive rejection. It lacks empathy. It lacks compassion for the effects of the rejection, one being rejected. And the 4th form, the 4th category of rejection that Dr. Kim and his team found there at the University of Toronto is what they call deflecting rejection. Deflecting rejection. Here they write, you pretend not to notice that your partner is interested in sex. You may also turn away from them, lie in a position that it's hard to snuggle with, or pretend to be asleep. This is actually what I experienced early on. Luella didn't know what to do. She's got a lower sex drive. I have a higher sex drive. Every relationship has that. Read Dr. Michelle Wiener Davis's book, that we're in all relationships, there's one that higher sex drive, one has a lower sex drive. That's not bad. That's just differences. The problem is couples aren't having sex, foregoing it, because the one that doesn't want it usually went out because they don't want it, and the one that does want it ends up suffering. But the one that doesn't want it doesn't suffer. The only suffering they get is the complaining of the one that's wanting it. But the reason they're complaining is because there's a pain there. But the one that doesn't want it's not caring about that. So one of the ways you can deal with that feeling, oh gosh, they're wanting sex, I'll fake like I'm asleep, or I'll act like I'm angry, or whatever it is. So you deflect it. So you shift it away from the focus on the need for the desire for sex, and you just deflect it as if you're doing something else, or busy or preoccupied. Some people actually will change the subject, and some people will create conflict in another area to get away from it. All of that is still a form of rejection. It's because I don't want to deal with saying no, so I'll just act like I'm asleep. Luella used to turn her back on me and go to sleep. And I'm like, well, I don't want to wake her up, so I'll leave her alone. Fortunately, 37 years of marriage, my wife are in a very, very wonderful place. We are in us. We have grown and matured so much. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. It doesn't mean she's perfect. It does mean that we've matured enough that we don't argue and yell and scream or do anything like that. We actually meet each other's needs, and we're patient with each other. We're kind with each other because we value us more than ourselves. We meet each other's needs. And we do it in healthy ways, not immature, unhealthy ways. So deflecting rejection is another of those strategies. So what are the 4 strategies identified by research at the University of Toronto, Dr. James Kim and his team? Reassuring rejection. Number 2 is hostile rejection. Number 3 is assertive rejection. And number 4 is deflecting rejection. And everybody has their way of dealing with rejection. Some people turn to anger. They're just angry. Why? Anger is what's known as a secondary emotion. It's a cover for pain. It's more pleasurable to feel anger than the pain that's underneath it, because anger covers pain. It's safer than feeling the pain itself. Think of it this way. Would you rather feel rejection, or would you rather feel angry that you were rejected? You want to feel the anger that you were rejected. Why? It's safer. It's actually safer to feel that. To feel the rejection? Oh man, no way. That's painful. That's vulnerable. Many people do rejection by getting angry. And now you're angry, you're being rejected. So what do? A lot of strategies. Yell, scream, sulk, whine, threaten. There's a lot of things that people do when they feel rejected, when they're angry. Some people take that rejection and turn it to fear. Well, I'm afraid that I'm not lovable. I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. I'm afraid that I'll never be good enough. I'm afraid that if I don't get you to notice me, then our marriage would fall apart. Fear. And what the fear does, a lot of times, it elevates itself to an all-important status. So you start to do things to take your needs from the other person. Maybe you take it by threatening. If you don't do this, then I'm going to. Or maybe you do it the way I used to do it back in those early years of my marriage, in the first 8 or 9 years. I'd sulk. I'd whine. That's what I do. Don't want to meet my needs? Fine. I ain't talking to you. I'm not proud of this, folks, but it is what I did. Why? I was still emotionally a child. The only thing we talk about and relate well, we talk about the emotional stages of development. We actually identify what is an emotional infant, what is an emotional child, what is an emotional adolescent, what does a mature adult look like. My goal was to become a mature adult. Now, my wife says I am, so I don't have to believe her, right? But I wasn't when we first got married. I was emotionally a child. And so when I felt rejection, I just sulk and whine. So some people get angry. Some people turn to fear. Some people take that and they turn it to pain. And the reason is they already believe they're not good enough. They're unlovable. They're not desired. And some people get angry. Some get afraid. But some people get depressed. Now, they may have come into the relationship already believing those things about themselves anyways. And yet, when there's sexual rejection, you continue sending the message, I don't desire you. And what do they hear? I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm undesirable. I'm inadequate. That's how they'll interpret it. And all that leads to depression. Some people will take that pain and say, fine, then I'll just go meet the needs myself. And then you see people moving into pornography and all kinds of things like that. Why? They can't take the pain, but the need is still there at the biological level. So then, if I can't depend on you to be there, then I have to depend on myself. I'm not saying I agree with those choices, but some people, they're fine. If you don't care enough about this part of our relationship and me and these needs I have, then I'm in a position to make decisions for myself.